founders, it's Christy Bareijsza, and I'm your catalyst to finding her. Let's get started. Everyone, welcome to Finding Her. My name is Christy Bareijsza, and I am not a psychologist. I am not a therapist. Hell, I'm not even a life coach. I am just a girl in her 40s, just trying to figure it out. I've experienced overwhelming changes that have put me in places that I never thought I'd be in my entire life, but here I am. So as I always say, my disclaimer is I will continue to make mistakes and I will do my best to keep making more because it definitely keeps life interesting. And of course, it makes great stories. So to make a very long story short, what I am more than anything else is just a catalyst for change and to just, do a little good in this world. So let's talk about last week's topic, which was development. And, let's go through a couple of those reminders of those key points just to make sure that as we grow and as we get into the next topic, you really truly understand that you are building on each element to get you to where you need to go. So one of the things we talked about was setting yourself apart by positioning yourself as an industry leader. So my favorite words, founders, is that you get that opportunity. And when you get that opportunity, no matter how you get it, you better bring it. It's so fucking critical is to bring it. And it's a work in progress to set yourself apart. And it's not easy, but you want to be prepared for everything, educating yourself, looking the part, acting the part, doing your research, deep diving social media, whatever the hell is, whatever you're setting yourself up for, whether it's a job interview, whether it's a new date, whether it's a interview to go back to school, whatever the case is, you always want to be prepared. And I just can't stress that enough because that's what makes an industry leader. Because it's not, everyone talks about getting to the top. The top is almost not where you want to be. It sounds really odd to say that, but it's one of those things where the journey that's most important is how you get up that hill. Because unfortunately, when you get to that top, the only other way back is down. So you want to keep climbing where that hill just is never ending, where it keeps going up and up and up and up and up. And that's part of that growth. And that's what's really exciting because you never want to get complacent and you never want to have that bored aspect of just being like, well, I'm here, now what? And you stop trying because that's just not okay, period, for anything in life. Second thing is creating the ideal resume or business plan and professional profile. So image, perception is complete reality. So how do you look? How do you act? How do you conduct yourself? What are you posting, especially with social media? I had a conversation about this the other day with a new hire that I have is, I have two rules with people that work for me. One of them is that you can keep your profile completely private. You post what you want to post on it. It is what it is. There will be no clients on there. There will be no colleagues, friends, anything that's related to my company, and it stays and remains private, period. Or it's open, and if it is open, that's perfectly fine, but it always needs to remain, as I call, PG-13. So as you look on my profile and my social media, yes, I curse. Shocker. But it's also one of those things, too, where I purposely stay away from religion. I purposely stay away from politics. I purposely stay away from topics that cause a divide. Because for me, that's not what my message is. My message is not to isolate one group or another group. My message is also not to create an uncomfortable element to views that I may have or someone else has. I mean, believe me, I have an opinion like everybody else. What do they say? People have opinions like assholes. Everybody's got one. So I absolutely do. But I'm also someone that tends to educate myself, tends to, really see all sides of the spectrum. And because I see all sides of the spectrum, I try to keep things in a way that are very neutral because that is important to me. But in my, LinkedIn profile, in my business website, there's things too where always keeping those elements up to date, always keeping them fresh, basically consistently refreshing where you're reconnecting with people or you're connecting with new people in your network, you are reaching out, you're having conversations, whatever the case be. But it's just to have that kind of outlook where it's not another thing that's just stagnant. It's constantly being, worked on and being evolved, because that is going to grab people's attention too. And I'm not saying fabricate, and I am not saying that overemphasize. I am not saying to make it better than what it is. I'm saying to be smart about it, use the correct words. And you can always do that too by researching. You can research different people that have similar careers in your profession or where you're trying to go or whatever the case is. But you always have to make sure that you're doing the work behind it. Don't turn around and say, oh, yeah, I can do this, this, and this. Or, there was this relevant conversation now with a housewife that is an anesthesiologist, but she's a nurse. So she's not an anesthesiologist. She is actually a nurse assistant, saying that she is. And the board of anesthesiologists, or the association of, a lot of big words for me today, actually put out a statement basically saying that a doctor has this much education, this much, training hours, years that are all tied into what makes them an expert in their profession, and it's extremely critical. And I actually appreciate that more than anything else, because a lot of times now there's just such a presence of, fake it till you make it, which is a different mindset than actually having a mindset of manifesting and thinking the big picture and working towards goals. Because one is more of a frivolous kind of mindset, and one is understanding the hard work that goes into that success. So that was really important to me. And it kind of hit home for me, because what I do on the side, my full-time job is producing events, which is an intangible service. And with that intangible service, it's not something that people, when they hire me, it's not like they're buying a car where they can actually sit in it, drive it, touch it, hear it, all of those things, have a full sensory experience. With me, they either have to really like me, have been to one of my events where they see the difference, or have been through an experience that they know the good from the bad. And it's harder because I can explain it, I can show pictures, I can document certain things in my past that can show the quality of work and the type of things that I do. But the reality is, it's not something that's so quantifiable by a physical object. So with that, your resume, your business plans, your professional profiles, they kind of fall into that. They're not really tangible. They're kind of setting that expectation too of what it is and who you are. So every aspect of that, from this very moment to 10 years ago to whatever the case is a representation of you. So where your goals are, what you're trying to do, you need to make sure that story reads the same as what you are working towards. Understanding the competition and how to present yourself in interviews and meetings, which goes into the same thing. That is, what do you look like? Dress for the part. Dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have. That's another statement where these are all kind of funny statements that you see, or you see them on a meme, or you see them or whatever. They're really true. Like, they hold true to people's perception. Because unfortunately, when you're meeting someone, especially for the first time, their initial impression, their perception of you is going to be reality for them, because it's just how life works. People will make decisions right away. People will, voice their opinion of you right away, even though they haven't given you the time to get to know you, or there might be something along the lines that, I don't know. It's just how it is. And like you guys, my founders, like, you've had perception immediately of me in that first 5 seconds. And that's the thing. It's like, it's about just the image is reality. And I wish I could change it. I wish that there was time where you could sit back and say, okay, you know what? Everyone you meet gets a 3-month vetting, and then you make your decision. But that's just not what the case is. And especially when you're interviewing for a job, you're competing against others for that same position, or you're interviewing maybe for a school in a university where you're trying to get into a certain major. the competition's high. So what's going to set you apart? What's going to make you different? What's going to prepare you? Whether it's something too about, maybe you come into that meeting or come into that interview with a presentation or, some type of research. Like, I'm not saying work for free, because it's also one of those things too, where it's that fine line, because I've had people come in and say, oh, I need you to pitch all this stuff for me. And then all of a sudden they keep the pitch, but they don't give me the job. So you always have to do things within reason and really understand what that circumstance is, because understanding what the circumstance is going to help you to make better decisions on how much effort you want to put into it. Obviously, you want to always give 100%, but you could also give 100%, but also do out it. Like for instance, I have a case study. So when someone is asking me about my services and what I do from an event world, I have an electronic press kit, which kind of shows back pictures and things like that, and kind of how the process works. But I also have a case study of what that event looked like before, which was a warehouse. And the one that I use is this large, huge event that I did at a pier in New York City, where we took basically just a complete raw space that's over the Hudson River in New York City and turned it into a full tennis court, a full concert. There was all these celebrity chefs. We had actually celebrities in tow. We had performances, lighting, it was fabulous. And it can show people that might not really understand when you say, hey, I plan events. They think balloons, clowns, parties, whatever the case is. It's not that. There's the production, there's working with unions, there's mitigating liabilities, understanding insurance requirements, understanding large crowds, how to deal with VIPs, all of that stuff. So it kind of gives them a better perspective of what it is. And that's a case study that works, where it's a simple, I think it's 5 or 6 pages, and it just tells a story. So how do you tell that story both professionally, from an image standpoint, from a documentation standpoint, just to a full who you are, how you talk, how you act, how you look, all that good stuff. And know that every other person in there is they may not assume, better word, that every person in there that you're competing against is doing that and more. And that's how you're going to win every time. But also understand that if you don't get what you wanted, it might have not, and you did the work. Let me stop myself. You did the work. You were genuine about it. Understand that was not meant for you, and there's something better. And things come out of situations like that in ways that we don't expect, and it might not be that day, it might not be today, tomorrow, 3 months from now, but you would be surprised. For instance, I just got a call. I had worked on a project 2 years ago. Great relationship. It just, I worked on the project. They needed me for what it was. Sometimes, I won't get a call back because they don't need me, or they have the service, or they hire someone full time. It's just, and it's not because it's an ill relationship. It's just that it is what it is. It's not always, I'm not full time. So, with different projects that I work with. So it's just kind of, it's just how it rolls. And 2 years later, I just got a call from one of the COOs that was on that project that is no longer with that company, and had another project, and said, hey, you stood out in my mind. I enjoyed working with you. Will you work with me again? Who knew? And here I thought, oh, well, they don't want me, they don't need me, or whatever the case is, but something else came out of it. So you just never know. And life is about the long game. It's just not about the short game. So the more that you realize that, it helps you reduce your stress. It helps you to kind of have a better understanding of the bigger picture. And it also takes a little bit of emotion out of it and makes it, you just feel better. Like, it sucks when you don't get something. It sucks when someone else maybe have gotten it, a job that you really, really wanted. But it's just, it might have not been for your best and highest good. So if you look at it that way, you might be sad about it, but you'll get through it a lot easier. Now, the next one was uncovering sales and job opportunities that open additional doors, which is kind of what I just started talking about. So understanding that what you see from face value might not be what it actually is. So always go into every situation with an open mind. Don't go into it saying, you know what, I only want a full-time job. This is it. This is what I want. And if I don't get it, I'm not doing it. Because you never know. And honestly, sometimes too, contractor roles, you get paid more. Or if you have an hourly rate versus a salary rate, sometimes when you do those hours, like that's you're a non-exempt employee, which means you work a certain amount of hours, you're starting to go into overtime. So you'll get time and a half after a certain amount of hours, which you might get far more revenue in the long term versus being a full-time employee that gets, a certain, time allotment a week, and you get paid for that. And if you work overtime, you work overtime. It's on you. It's not on them. So, there's so many different factors. Or it might be a situation that you didn't get a role and somebody else, left the company, or there was another opportunity, or they really enjoyed you, or they might have a referral. Like, you never know who somebody knows. I mean, that's the biggest thing too. Like, I know a lot of people. I just sometimes don't even realize how many people that I know until I'm having a conversation with someone, and it might not be a good fit for me, but I'm like, wait a minute, this is a great fit for this person or that person, or this might be a really great relationship that I can connect these two people, because I am a big proponent in paying it forward. Because yes, people talk about value and connections, and some people are able to make businesses off of that, which is wonderful. But for me, I'm more in the karmic sense of it, where I really try to pay it forward. I try to help others because I have been helped so many times. And that's part of it too. I have really, truly been helped by so many in a way that they've never asked for anything in return. And it's the kindest thing in the world. And I try to do the same because it was done for me, and continue that goodwill. So with that, understanding that opportunities don't always present themselves in a way that we think that they're supposed to be presenting themselves is so critical. And it's a great mindset because it really shifts the way that you think about things and the way that you approach things, which I think is super important. Now, the other one is building professional habits that create positive outcomes, which, like I said, I've been going through this. We talked about it last week. So, just doing things in a way that you're thinking about all aspects, like, when you post videos, when you post memes, when you post things, like always remaining professional. I'm not saying that you should silence yourself. I am not saying that you should censor yourself. That is not what I'm saying. Whatever your path is and the direction that you go, understand that that is the image that's perceived, and that's kind of where that kind of like who you are is what you're portraying out there. People do it all the time. I mean, you see so many influencers and different people, what is out there is not always who they are. Me personally, I can read through the bullshit as a person that, didn't grow up on social media. I also am someone that's a very genuine person. So when I put things out there, it is genuine and it's authentic. And that is part of my brand. My brand is basically saying, hey, this is who I am, take it or leave it. I'm good with that. But I'm also strong enough where they're not good with that. I don't give a shit. You don't have to like me. You absolutely don't have to like me. You just have to respect me. I will always respect you. I will respect your opinion, but you have to respect me and respect mine. So, there are a lot of trolls out there. There are a lot of people out there that just really look for the negative. So when you do put things out there, being strong enough to be in your own convictions of understanding that this is who I am and creating those positive outcomes. So with your profession, keeping and maintaining those professional habits where just after you get the job, it just doesn't stop and you go back to whatever you feel is comfortable or your norm or what you thought was that, or what you were presenting was inauthentic. Making sure that you're doing things in a way that it creates positive outcomes. Don't burn those bridges. Fight for yourself and fight for what you feel is right, but do it in a way that's strategic. Do it in a way that's smart. Do it in a way that allows you future opportunities or allows you to look at things in a different way that you're able to maneuver. And make different choices. Because if you isolate yourself and burn that bridge down, or even, just let that whole bridge go blaze, it's you just don't know, because it's not like it was with our grandparents that people stayed in the same jobs forever. They'd be at the same company for 40 years and they would retire and that would be it. That's not necessarily the case anymore. People move around, things change. Jobs don't always look like what they used to look like, where they were very much pigeonholed and they were very much in a kind of box where they are able to, just say, okay, you're a teacher. This is where you work. This is what you do. I mean, now you've got homeschooling. You've got, international, that you've got, a lot of times celebrities have their kids with them when they're on tour, and you're able to be a teacher on tour traveling to, different countries. I mean, there's just all these different opportunities that weren't, 20, 30, 40 years ago that are there now. So just understanding that opportunities arise when you do the work and you do it with grace. You do it with professionalism. You do it with care. I mean, because there are people, and listen, people are assholes. They do some asshole shit. Listen, I've encountered a few of them that even to this day, they come to the top of my head right now that I just don't care, still don't like. But I'm not saying do as I say, not as I do. Joking. But no, and but part of it was acknowledging it, letting it go. And that was my mistake. Like I said, I'm not perfect. But the last thing that we talked about last time was retaining long-term employment or client relationships, which is what I've been talking about now too, is that all of this stuff kind of ties in together where you just don't know. So, keeping in touch with people, picking up the phone, calling them, saying hello. It doesn't mean you have to do it every day. It doesn't mean that you have to call when you want something. It's just nice to hear from people. It's just nice to maintain relationships. It's nice to catch up, especially with people that have helped you in the past, or you've worked together, or you've had these great relationships, because you just never know what it leads into. So keeping that mind frame as, you're at the point of starting over and forgiving yourself and becoming accountable. And here you are trying to develop yourself as an individual to get to the next steps of where you need to go. It's just so critical to do it the right way versus doing it a way that is just short term. So that is, what we talked about last week. And with that, as we get to that point, we kind of lead into what the next topic is today, which sometimes when you're at a point in your life, it seems completely near impossible to get where you need to get. And you just feel like you're completely drowning, and you just have a mind frame where you just don't even truly understand at this point how you're going to build wealth. And that is our next topic, which I know is a very, very, very important one, because money is what makes the world go around. So, okay, founders, as you know, we always have our quotes. I know you're starting to love those quotes. They're good. Anyway, so let me read my quote that is tied into building wealth, that I feel like is part of this whole segment and really kind of ties it in. So I quote, "You don't find ground by looking for stability. You find your ground by relaxing into instability." So change is inevitable, as we talked about over and over again, and change actually comes with wealth. What people don't realize is that financial security isn't something that's guaranteed. You can plan for it, you can prepare for it, you can save for it, but the bottom line is that money is something that just flows. It's like water. The tides come in, the tides come out. And the more that you're able to understand that financial wealth and gain isn't something that is really tangible, you're going to understand it more, and you're not going to be afraid of it as much. Because you have to believe deep down inside, I mean, we have all been, I'll tell you right now, that pandemic decimated my business to the point where it was negative. It wasn't even, my account's negative. I have been through it. And yes, people that know me, yes, I am a child of an entrepreneur. Yes, I could have had the golden parachute, but those golden parachutes come with a price. They come with a big price. And it's also a lesson for me that I had to learn to get out of. It was a lesson for me also to learn how to fight for me, and to fight for the business, and to redirect my mindset, redirect my thoughts, redirect my services to accommodate the present situation. So I have been in business since 2006 on my own, but I came from the corporate world. where I ran event departments for Fortune 500 companies, both in North America and internationally. So being that I'm not that young, I have been through certain phases in our country's economy. So part of that was, after 9/11, obviously they're had, taken a major toll in how Americans looked at things. Because I've always been an event professional for most of my career, a lot of that is built on face-to-face interaction, conferences, meetings, events, things that people require, planes to travel to these destinations, being face-to-face, leaving your families and going on a trip, whatever the case may be. So after 9/11, obviously when, and some of you might be too young to remember just the situation, especially on the East Coast, when all the flights were grounded and, this attack happened, people were scared. I mean, here you are flying and the plane is hijacked. I mean, it's terrifying. And the outcome of what happened was terrifying. After that, even though new rules were implemented, security measures were implemented, whatever the case was, it was a good year before events really kind of came back. In my case, thinking back, because I'm now thinking back 22 years, our company, I had worked in another position I worked for Oppenheimer Funds during 9/11, and after that, the company just kind of wasn't the same, and there was an opportunity that came up at the time. It was TD Waterhouse was the company name. It's now TD Ameritrade. Now I guess it's Charles Schwab. But at that time, I'd gotten a call from a friend of mine who, once again, as we go into the last lesson, she was a friend of mine and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity here. Would you like to interview for it?" And this was in November of 2001. And with that, I basically was like, absolutely, because also their offices were in Jersey City, which was on the other side of Manhattan, which I call the city because there's only one city as far as I'm concerned, and most Americans. So for the podcast, I will say Manhattan, but the city. So it was on the other side of the city, on the other side of the Hudson. And I was really interested in it because as much as I experienced what I experienced and I was okay, I wasn't great, but I was okay, I felt safer not having to go into New York City, especially with the aftermath of 9/11. So I ended up getting that job. And making a long story short, one of the things that the CEO decided was our national conference for that company was in February. And they wanted to continue to move forward. And they're like, you know what? We are New Yorkers. We are Americans. We are not going to put up with this shit. We are not going to have people stop what we're doing, especially, too, because it was a financial company. We're not going to have them stop, and we're going to continue doing what we're doing. And we moved forward with that conference, which was in Orlando at the time. And we had a little bit less of a turnout, and I would say probably about 20%, which in the grand scheme of things wasn't that impactful, being that it was, October, November, December, 4 months after the only terrorist attack to ever hit U.S. property, U.S. soil, I should say. So it sent a message, but it also taught me at that moment, and it's interesting because people will ask me, was I afraid to fly? Was I afraid to get on a plane? I'm still not. I've never been. I've traveled since I was a small child. Like my father traveled a lot for work. And we just always, I put a lot of emphasis on travel. But understanding that we moved forward, you just kind of did it. But I didn't even think about it. But with that, there was the mindset for that. Then I experienced, and at the time I was working for corporate. So obviously I had a paycheck every week. I had bonuses. I had stock options. I had all those wonderful things, health benefits, all that fun stuff. And then I had, moved on my career a little bit. And then when I went on my own, it was December of 2005. I I was over corporate. I was kind of done. I was making good money, and and I was making consistent money, and I was doing well, and I was successful in my career, and I had, a lot of just different. I'd been recognized by a lot of different outlets as an expert, as someone who sets trends in the industry. I had a lot of different opportunities with the mayor of New York at the time, the Four Seasons, and it was really great. But I was burnt out, and I wanted to go on my own, and part of it is that it's inherent. Like, I'm a child of an entrepreneur. I have that attitude. If you don't like it, too fucking bad. I don't care. And that doesn't always work in corporate. Like I like to say that people, everyone has a different path. I'm not good with red tape. I am not good with games. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I make faces. I can say nothing and you can read 100% what I am thinking. Doesn't make me the best candidate for a corporation, especially in the financial world and especially with those games. Not saying that all corporations are like that, but at the time in the business that I was, in the areas that I were, it was just something that was more prevalent than it was not. So I got burned out, and I had left TD Waterhouse at the time, TD Ameritrade, and then I went to Barclays Capital. I just was burned out. So I was going on my own because I just had enough. And sometimes decisions happen where you just go, fuck it. And in my defense, I had started my company part-time in 2001, just as a part-time thing, because I figured in my, deep down inside, and I think that's another thing that you should always kind of listen to is your gut. Deep down in my gut, when I thought about things, at 25 years old, I was like, I'm going to be on my own one day. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And even when I named my company, my company is Red Carpet Events. When I named it, and actually now it's Events by Red Carpet, because when I moved it, I had to change the names around because the name was already taken, but whatever case, Red Carpet. Even when I named the company, in my head, there was always an exit strategy of I'm going to start this, I'm going to name it something that doesn't always tie into me as far as I remember I was at Pastis, if anybody remembers that restaurant in the meatpacking district, back in the day. And I looked at a bottle of red wine and I'm like, I'm going to name it Red Carpet. Because everybody wants to be treated like royalty. Everybody wants to be treated like a celebrity. Everybody wants to feel good. Everybody likes the glamour of events, and that's what I'm going to do. And it was literally that second in my head, and I stuck with it because sometimes I feel like that's that divine intervention, that divine timing, where it's you're given something, run with it. And here, all these years later, it still exists. So, but I also thought of it in a way that I didn't want to tie it to myself where it was like Christy's Events or whatever the case was, where I could grow something and not have to be so physically tied to it. And here I am, almost 20 years later, more than 20 years, doing that situation where I can kind of divide the two. And as much as I thought about it when I was younger, I didn't really think about it in a way. I just trusted myself. But the point of my story, which I told you I go around in circles sometimes, is that I had left corporate, started on my own, and not even a year and a half later, our economy just collapsed. It was the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, 10, where it just started and just completely fell apart. Unbeknownst to my decisions to do whatever and just go by gut and just kind of not think about it. And I've done that a lot. I get an idea. I don't really even think about it. And I'm like, you know what? My gut tells me to go, I go and I do it. And what it did was it gave me a head start to a lot of my colleagues that unfortunately worked in corporate, had these great jobs, but when the economy went left, it just turned around and they lost their jobs. And then they were forced to take more of an administrative role job. They were supposed to take, just any role possible, changing their career entirely because of this situation. And just to give you a little history on event planning, because that's what I do, I'll give you random information that for some reason it'll be a Jeopardy question and you'll remember it, is that event planning as a profession really didn't start until the early 90s, because a lot of times it was more considered an administrative support role, and they didn't really, they meaning like major corporations, companies, whatever the case is, didn't really understand the emphasis and the need to have experts in this role, because at the time they didn't realize that there were a lot of liabilities, insurance liabilities, mitigating damages, things can happen, negotiating contracts, and, you know, doing them in a way with hotels that, you know, you're protecting the downside, you're protecting, you know, the financial revenues or the financial costs, learning how to have sponsorships, and learning that this was more of a business and planning it in a way that's business versus it being a role that was someone was, you know, making a dinner reservation for 10 people. So in the 90s, that's when this career started becoming an actual career, being validated in the professional world. And then you fast forward a good 10 plus years later, it wasn't strong enough and it wasn't solid enough to be sustainable as far as people's thoughts. And because, you know, they didn't have the extra money to travel and do these things, because obviously most, you know, events in the corporate world are not cheap, you know, that was the first thing to go. So a lot of my friends, unfortunately, were out of work dealing with the same experience that I kind of chose to deal with, which was kind of cool because I did it on my own terms. I didn't realize I was doing it that way, but I did it on my own terms. And for me, it also forced me to be in a situation that, because I was not getting the income that I would normally get every 2 weeks with a normal paycheck, I had to be scrappy. I had to be resourceful. I had to fucking figure this shit out. And I always was able to do it because I would do things in a way where an opportunity came up. When a girlfriend had called me, she knew that I was on my own, and she had repped one of the venues that this company happened to own. They owned 2 venues, and they needed somebody. She called me and she said, take the venue on. And I'm like, great idea. So I actually, when I took that venue on, I was able to get some income coming in. I was able to get commissions for the events that I was putting on, which was a bit of a struggle. But as I was doing it, they already had a client base. And then I was also able to build those clients. And because I was doing so well at that job, they kind of had that perspective too of where I might not be there forever, but they could hire me in other capacities, which was great. So it was kind of that win-win where I was able to leverage some different aspects to this position that some people would look at as a service position. Okay, well, you're back to getting a salary every week or every 2 weeks or once a month. It's like, no. I'm there building what I'm doing and being able to do both, which was really, really successful for me. And because of that, it took me out of that financial world where I was kind of pigeonholed, because that's what my corporate career was mostly. So that's where my contacts were, my network and all that stuff, which had now been decimated. And it opened new doors to different industries. And with those industries, I started thinking about it, because I was like, okay, who has money to spend? Because that's who I have to go after. So when I thought about it, especially in the financial crash, I'm like, people aren't buying houses. They're not doing, different things like that. What are they doing? Shit, they're drinking and smoking. Hello? What do people do when they're miserable? They drink, they smoke. I mean, what do they do when they're happy? They drink, they smoke. So that's what I actually positioned myself to go after. And I started going after the alcohol companies to start pitching them, because they had bigger budgets than they ever had in their entire lives, because their products were flying off the shelves. So it changed my perspective on how to flow that money back into my business in a time that was concerning, because people are losing their houses, mortgages. I mean, it was bad. And it's funny because, like, in, The Wolf of Wall Street or in The Big Short, they a lot of these movies, they try to glamorize what happened after the fact or whatever the case was, and it was pretty serious. And a lot of people were impacted by it. And I mean, companies went under. I mean, people lost jobs, and it's just, they forget that aspect, because a lot of times we'll look at stuff, especially from a historical standpoint, and look at it and, like I said, glamorize it and make it feel like this is what happened. And it's like, I mean, people, some people took their lives. They were devastated. They were just, I mean, it was rough. I mean, you're losing your house. You're losing all these things that were brought to you by this wealth, by this money. And the second it was taken away was the second that they thought it was over. And what happened is that perspective was lost on how to recover through it, where, like I said, my perspective changed to this area is not working for me. Let me find a new area. Let me find new clients. Let me find new industries. That's what I did. And, good, bad, indifferent. Maybe it was dumb luck, whatever the fuck it was. But it was one of those things where I could turn around and say, okay, this doesn't work. I've got this to kind of support me. It's not enough. How am I going to really make this work? And that's exactly how it is. And when I shifted my mindset and when I shifted my perception on where to look and how to do things, all of a sudden business started rolling in. I was making more money than I was in my corporate job. And then, and that's actually what led to Miami, because as that started to dry out, because honestly, to New York City, it is always going to be my home. I love it dearly, but it is an expensive fucking city. And with the economy being the way it was and whatever the case was, as far as like with rents have always just been high. I then decided that at this point, the city kind of had come to a stall. And that's actually what triggered my move to Miami, my original move, because I looked at that too, where I was already working with, different industries, which I didn't necessarily need to be in New York for. And then also, Miami has a big healthcare market. There's a lot of older people, there's pharmaceutical companies, whatever the case was, but that was flourishing, as well as the European and South American business, because they weren't impacted as much as the Americans were. And Miami at the time, in 2012, was very, very inexpensive to live there. So I was like, you know what? I can make less money. I can build my business differently. I have new opportunities that are down there. And that's kind of what sparked that move. But why I say that and why I go through this whole story is that you can't look at stuff face value. Like, you can't look at it from a surface perspective, and you can't be driven by money. You have to be driven by opportunity. And yes, money pays bills. Absolutely. But money flows. So the more that you hold on to it and the more that you just don't spend it and don't use it and don't interact with it, the more stagnant you're going to be. If you look at it and say, okay, here's a little spend and here's this or here's that, or here's a resource that I can use to help get me to another opportunity, all of a sudden that money starts coming back in. But you have to be smart about it. Now, going through those two experiences with the pandemic, it was a lot different. And why I say this is because of 9/11, because of the financial crisis, they were somewhat regionalized, where when the world shuts down, it's kind of a big deal. I can't regionalize on Mars, or the moon. So, I mean, maybe I could, I don't know. But so it became very different. But with that, as some people went to virtual and did things like that, I started cleaning up my company and going through mistakes that I knew that I had made in the past, or dealing with stuff that I just hadn't dealt with in years because I just didn't have the time. So I was able to kind of revisit stuff and strategize and look at things in a way that made more sense. Work smarter, not harder. Get designations, get certifications that were, things that could help my business because eventually, most people thought this was going to last like 2 months. I said 2 years. I'm not psychic. I'm not anything. I'm just someone that has always been able to set trends. I see trends, I should say. I do set them sometimes, but I see them. I kind of understand. And I also kind of look at things. I have a degree in history, art history, and dance. So sometimes that random, useless degree that I have and just random stuff becomes something that can kind of help make decisions and help me kind of understand where we are and where we're going. So looking at that, I just feel like in history, life is it just goes in full circle. And in the 1920s, obviously, they had the Great Depression. They had the Spanish flu. That was right before capitalism really became what it was and entrepreneurs became who they were in America. The stock market crash. I mean, there were so many things that happened at that moment that were very, very similar to where we were at 2020 that when I started researching that and understanding the recovery time, because, you know, in history, like I said, people just look at it and say, oh, this happened, and they glamorize it and it was this big explosion. A lot of things don't happen that way. They don't. They happen very slowly when people are not paying attention. Okay? So it's obvious. People don't want to see it. So a lot of times that's how that works, and that's how that happens. It's just not remembered that way. It's not told that way. But things happen very slowly. So when I looked at it and I looked at the recovery phase, I knew it was going to be 2 years. That being said, I basically focused on my business and focused on how I can do. I didn't just automatically try to switch and do virtual because, like, honestly, virtual, it wasn't going to do it. It just, people weren't in the same mindset. There was so many things going on that just didn't make sense. But it was also one of those things too, where it was, it just gave me time, and also gave me time to ping pong my creativity, which I had pitched some TV shows. I had pitched, you know, a couple different projects, and some of these things took legs, and it was kind of almost fun. And even though people were like, where's the money? How are you going to get paid? I mean, we were able to defer our rent. We were able to, you know, get unemployment. I was able to get a PPP loan. I was able to get things, and they weren't huge amounts, but it survived, because honestly, things don't always come in the way that you think they're going to come in, but they're going to come in for your best and highest good. So yeah, you know what? Would I have loved to get a PPP loan that was $500,000? Yeah, that would have been great. It was less than $10,000 I got, but I was able to stretch that in projects and things that I needed to do because I had to defer things and do whatever the case was. So it's about working with what you have and using money to work for you and not using money against you, and focusing on what you have and how to get there versus what you don't have and what you can't afford, if that makes sense. So that kind of will take away the fear. That'll take away the stress. And I'm not saying it wasn't stressful. There was times that things were stressful. And that was part of, my marriage should have been over, I'll tell you that. It got delayed another 2 years because of this pandemic, because there was nowhere to go, nowhere to do. Like, you know, it did limit me on just getting up and moving to another apartment or moving a state or whatever the case was. You know, there are limits, but I also look at those limits as that allowed me prep time to make moves differently and to be strategic about my moves and understand how to do things and find the resources that when money was tight, they were able to support me and help me, because they were organizations that would help women that were in need, which I think is also something very critical, because a lot of times in that time of need, that answer is right there. It is right in front of your fucking face. Okay, founders? Right there. It is there. You just have to open your eyes and look for it. And you got to do the work. And you got to make sure that you do the work for you, because that is something that is so completely important, that those answers will always be there. You just have to ask for help. And I'm not saying you can ask people for help, but sometimes I literally will talk to myself and be like, guys, I need help, or my angels, or my universe, like whatever you want, whatever you believe in. I will just sometimes say it out loud. I need help. Help me see this clearly. Help me find the resources. And for some reason, it kind of calms it, changes my perspective, and then I turn around and I'm like, oh, it was right there. It was in front of my face that whole time. I just didn't see it because I didn't choose to see it. And then all of a sudden, I shifted that mindset and I saw it. And that's something, because when the emotions are in there and the emotions are kind of stirring in your head, and I am the biggest, not only am I a member, I am the president of that. You get that spiral. And when you get that spiral, it's one of those things that it makes it worse. So you have to get yourself out of that and look at things very clearly and from a black and white perspective, and be more strategic about it and be more removed, because that will help you see it clear. So with that, with the pandemic, at the time I left Miami, because Miami, it just didn't do it for me. That's probably the best way to say it. I have good friends in Miami. I adore my friends in Miami. there was a feeling that I had there. I had a beautiful apartment in Miami. I had a lot of fucking fun in Miami. But I always felt like I was underwater. So I moved slower. I felt like I was doing things slower. My business was surviving, but it was slower. But the good thing about it surviving and it being slower and with the move was that because the cost of living was so much less, I could still sustain myself. So as much as someone might say, oh, you made the wrong decision by going down there, you made less money, whatever the case was, I was still able to sustain myself, which was very important. So I had decided that it wasn't the place for me at this point. And then that's when I chose to move. I thought about going to San Francisco, but then just by cost, things that were going on, everything that, I don't know. I just had a gut feeling. So I went to LA. And that's what I did. And I was there for 8 years, which I absolutely adored LA. And we've talked about this before. But with the pandemic, unfortunately, after the pandemic, LA just didn't survive in the way, or didn't, let me say that better. It didn't recover as quickly as other cities. And it continued to kind of have that 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 1 step forward, 4 steps back, which was really, really hard, especially in my business, going through these experiences that I've gone through, and now filing for divorce and going through a whole other experience. So for me, I had to look at that and say, okay, the decision I made, from New York to Miami was a very similar decision where I was like, I have to survive. Like, for me, looking historically, our economy, it's fucking shaky. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not running for president. I'll tell you that right now. But what anyone says, when someone says, it's fine, that is the first time you say, it is not fine. I'm telling you right now. The second someone tells me, oh yeah, it's fine, it ain't fine. It is not fine. I have believed that from day one. I have seen it. I look inside of it. I've been looking at just different industries, and some industries are fine. They are sustaining themselves. Some industries are not. And for me, in LA, where the smaller businesses did really take a hit, then we've had, the strikes. And there's just been a lot of things that have been happening on the West Coast that have really affected people professionally. I just needed to make a decision to be in a place that if shit goes left, and there's a problem, I can still survive. So I did some research. I kind of went on my gut feelings. I looked at different cities, and I even looked at Austin. I love Austin. I think Austin's a little bit more my vibe, But Austin is a city that had already been established. It's an expensive city. I mean, don't get me wrong. Dallas is the inflation here has been insane. But it was one of those cities that had been established. If it was 5 years before the pandemic, whatever the case was, I would have considered it differently. But based on what was happening, based on my relationships, based on business, based on the airport, based on how to get around to different parts of the country, because I also do produce things all over the world, it just made sense for me. And honestly, it's from a financial standpoint, my rent was cut in half, opportunities had doubled. I miss my ocean. I am freezing right now with this cold weather. I had no idea, and this is where, like, we always talk about being blonde and being a real blonde. I had fucking no idea that the further south you go, doesn't just get warmer. So I hate the cold. I absolutely hate the cold. I am fine going on vacation to Aspen, where it is a limited exposure to cold, but even today, I didn't even want to come. Freezing. So it's not perfect, but it's continued that flow. And it's a decision I made because it's about the bigger picture, and it's about sustainability and about opportunity. So it's a really long story that I just told, and I hope that you see the parts of it that make sense for you. But it's one of those things that these decisions aren't always necessarily decisions that are running from something, or that they're surface, or that they're just because. Sometimes I think they're just because I'm trusting my gut, but they're really not. They're actually sound decisions to support myself for the future, because we don't know what the future is. We've talked about this all the time. Future is not promised. Business is not promised. You got to do the work. But even when you do the work, the fruits of your labor don't always come back right away. They're not always something. I mean, I busted my ass last year and I barely made it work. And then all of a sudden this year, come 2024, I mean, it was like, on January 2nd, it was like a whistle went off and opportunities left and right and just projects. And it felt great. And as frustrated as I was last year in 2023, understanding that I just needed to persevere through the bullshit made me understand that, okay, this is what it was. And things are flowing a lot easier. I'm still being resourceful. I'm still being smart about it, but they're flowing easier where it just allows me that second to breathe. And that feels really fucking good. And that does come with money. That does come with different things like that. But it's also building my wealth in a way that's smart. So the next thing that I got into, and this is what I think is so important, is understanding how to do that. Because when I moved here, there were multiple women that I encountered that are not old, that didn't even know how to open a fucking bank account or open a credit card or understand where their money is going or who's touching their money. That is a problem. In 2024, in 2020, in 2010, in 2000, that is a problem. And you've got no one to blame. And if you're one of those women, I'm not yelling. I just talk loud. I'm not yelling. But wake up. Wake the fuck up. There's too many resources out there. There are too many opportunities to do your own research to protect yourself and protect your own money. Okay? Do not trust in anybody else. Do the fucking work. Okay? Because I had one woman that I encountered. We're going to call her Jamie, who, sweetest woman in the world. Absolutely adore her. And said something, about the fact that her husband had passed away unexpectedly. He was a little bit older. He had passed away, but he handled all the money and things like that. And she didn't even know how to write a check. People have been taking advantage of her, blah, 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 blah. The whole sob story, which I could understand because in my mind, I also do remember when my grandfather had passed and my grandmother who he had passed in 1981. But there was a generation where, when they were born, I guess they're the greatest generation. They're not even baby boomers. They were the greatest generation. They were born in, the early 1900s. The men did take care of things. There were laws in this country, even in the 70s here in Texas. There were laws that women couldn't, if they were married, you could not open a bank account on your own. You could not have a mortgage on your own. You could not own a fucking house on your own. A woman who was here, who was an attorney, who became a judge, made sure that that law changed in the 70s. And the crazy part about it was I was watching a documentary on it, was that when that law was passed, her husband, who was an attorney, had actually signed the fucking law so it could go into place. So women could not have to wouldn't have to rely on men to deal with their finances or deal with their properties or whatever the case was. So anyway, I digress. Because that stuff just blows my fucking mind because the 70s weren't that long ago. I mean, yes, for some, yes, but they really aren't. This is still current. So anyway, let me get back to my point. So Jamie, as we will call her, mentioned that like my grandmother did not, when my grandfather passed, and he passed very early in his 60s, that she did not know how to open a checking account, but fortunately my mother and my aunt, who were her daughters, knew. They taught her. We went through they really kind of brought her up to date because they actually were instilled with that skill through their father, which was, not always that common in the 60s and the 70s. So, and then in the early 80s. So that being said, when I spoke to this woman in 2022, she said something of a similar story. So I was like, oh, and I was thinking she was, in her 80s or 90. Like, she didn't look that, but, people look good. I mean, I tell people all the time I'm 300, but clearly I'm not. But it was an interesting thing. So she said her husband passed and she didn't know how to open a checking account. Like, people have been taking advantage, whatever the case was. So I was like, oh, and I just assumed he had just passed. He had passed 12 years ago. And then I asked her, may I ask your age? And then she told me her age. I did the math of 12 years ago, and I'm like, she's 48. It'll be my age in a month, but that's my age. It's right then and there. I was like I am now. I fucking loss of words. And to me, I was like, are you fucking kidding? And part of it is she doesn't want to learn. Part of it is that victim mentality. Part of it is that she wants to rely on people because that's her draw. That's that sympathy. And that's not okay. Because you know what? You get taken advantage of, it's your fucking fault. Money stolen from you, it's your fucking fault. Things happen to you, it's your fucking fault. Because in this day and age, it's one of those things where you need to learn. You're young. You're 60. You need to learn. You might have a good 40 years left in you. What are you going to do? You're just going to walk around as a victim, or you're going to walk around as just not knowing what's happening and just be like, oh, I don't know how this happened to me, because you let it happen to you. That's why it absolutely happened to you. Period. And the same thing too was, she had come back to me one more time, and here I am running a business. I am busy as fuck. And she's like, oh, I don't feel good. Can you take this to the post office? And I'm like, I can drop it down at the door because, we have a service, and why I chose my building was that I can take a prepaid label and absolutely send it to, the doorman will pick it up, or I can drop it at the concierge, whatever the case is, and it goes. Because listen, there's two places I don't ever want to go, and that's the DMV and that's the post office. So someone could say to me, I'll give you $1 million to go to the post office. And I would literally ask questions like, what time? When? How many people are in the line in front of me? How much of an asshole is the person at the desk going to do it? Am I going to have the right tools, or am I going to be sent back to the back of the line again because I didn't fill out the fucking form correctly? Like, I would probably not go. I would be like, you know what? You can keep your $1 million. I'm not fucking going. I hate that fucking post. So anyway, I chose my building based on the things that I loathe in life, because it's a smart way to do it. And she said, no, I have to send it to the thing. So I need you to go to the post office for me, little girl. And I'm like, fuck. And I'm like, and she doesn't even work. So I was like, no. I said, but what I can do is, I understand if you want to learn. I said, I have a printer in my house. I can teach you how to create an online prepaid label. And I can set you up, because I know it's a little bit confusing, and she is a little bit older, and maybe she hasn't had the technical skills that my mother has, or somebody else's mother, or whatever the case is. And I'm like, I'm happy to teach you. I said, so I can come over, I'll teach you how to do it. I'll help you set up an account and walk you through it. And then I'll print the label out for you. I've got packing tape, and we'll get it so we can get it downstairs. She goes, no, I don't want to do that. Then go fucking mail your own shit. Sorry. Like, guess what? You know what? Okay, cool. You get what you deserve. And that's the moral of my story, is that if you don't want to learn and shit happens to you, when there's people that can help you, resources, there are organizations out there, Credit Karma. They have, and this isn't even paid endorsement. They have been very helpful to understand what your credit is, understand what maybe you can get, what you can't get. There's articles. There's so many different resources for women, for men, for college students, for elders. Like, there's so many different things that are out there that are available to you to help you understand, as well as there's people and organizations that you can actually physically talk to that you might feel better about. Like, as far as it's one thing to read an article on a website, it's another thing to actually ask questions and talk to people. There's people that are help. For instance, that scenario where I was like, hey, I understand you don't know how to do that. Cool. I'm going to show you how to do it. And then when you say no, then, that shit's on you. So that being said, own your shit. And with wealth and with money, you will never have that wealth unless you know where every fucking dollar is, how it's spent, where it's spent, what you're doing, all of that good stuff. Because it's, money comes and goes. We've talked about that. Money flows. Yes, people will talk about manifesting money and it shows up and da-da-da-da and all this stuff. Yes, I believe in manifesting. Yes, I believe in positive thoughts. Do I think the work has to be done? Yes, because it's not going to be sustainable unless you do it right. So, hey, you manifested $1 million, you're the one that showed up to that post office when I didn't go. So you got that opportunity, or you scratched that lottery ticket and you got that money. If you don't treat it carefully, it's gone. It is fucking gone. And that is it. And there's nothing else about that. That's it. So you have to be smart about your money. I'm not saying that you put it in your mattress or you hoard it, like a chipmunk and a squirrel. And it's about, it needs to flow because it needs to come in and out because that's what's going to keep creating new opportunities. But it needs to be done in a way that you know where it is. You're not just frivolously giving it away. You're not just spending money on stuff that you don't really need, or it's fulfilling something that isn't really what's necessary. Like, you see a lot of women, especially down here, they'll buy certain things that want them, like designer goods, that make them feel good, that make them feel superior sometimes, that breeds into that insecurity of image. I am the biggest proponent, once again, not an endorsed deal. I love the real. Because I will go, yes, I like nice things too. I don't want to fucking pay for them. I don't want to pay full price. And there's certain things that, yes, you probably cannot get other than in that store, that location, whatever the case is. But there's a lot of things that I have gotten that have been like new for 70, 80% of the price. And honestly, that makes me happier than the item itself. And, and to each his own. But for me, and some of those designer goods, I look at them too because they're really well made. The brand stands behind their product. They will fix it. If it's 20 years later and there's an issue with that brand, you can, some of these designers, you can return that bag and they will give you a new one. They will fix it. They will do anything possible because they stand behind their product. And back in the day with designers and back in the day, it was more about that upper level of service and quality and things like that, where now it's more about that image perception and what it portrays, especially online. But at that point, why I always did like certain designers and certain things is because they stand behind their brand. And that to me is something that's very critical and important, at least to me. But if I can get it on sale, if I can get it at a sample sale, if I can get it at, consignment, if I can do any of that stuff, 100%. I'm great with that. And that's the thing. Understanding how to maneuver through and being smart about your money, being smart about where it is, what checking account, who has access to it, what you're building, how you're building, what you're spending on. Like, are you spending, on Netflix and Hulu and this and that? And is this all necessary? And I'm not saying that you should be cheap. And I'm not saying that you should limit yourself, because I am that person. I will say I like a discount, but fuck it, we're going. So you still have to live life, but you got to live life in a way that you're smart about how you spend. So, and not feel weird about it. I spend lean. I spend strategic and I spend meaningful. And I like to fucking shop. If there was an Olympic sport for shopping, I would win the gold medal every fucking time. And if there was an Olympic sport for who saves more, I would win the gold medal, because I've been encountered with friends that won't use a coupon. And I'm like, give me your coupon. I'll fucking use it. No fucking problem using a coupon. I have no problem using a discount. Why? Why wouldn't I? And even if I can afford it, I'm still using that coupon. I'm still shopping at TJ Maxx. I am still, because if it's something that I want that I can get less, and like I said it before, if it's something, some things you can't get in those stores, or you can't get a discount, and maybe there's a value to it, and something that you wanted for whatever case, it's a special occasion, whatever it is, because, you know, you still should, when you work really hard, you should, you know, you should be able to reward yourself in a way that you enjoy. Some people do that by, you know, going on vacation. Some people do that by buying themselves an item that they've always wanted, whatever the case is, whatever, you know. It's the case of that. I will always do that if I can get a discount. I mean, even my building offers discounts to the local restaurants, and they do it. I'm not taking advantage. I live in that building. They offer it. Why wouldn't I take advantage of it? It just doesn't make sense to me to not. But that's an ego thing. That's an image thing, and that's something that you have to step away from, because I just come from a world that's what you do. I was taught that, and I will teach other people to do that. And it's really important, because it's also one of those things too. If you can get two for the same value, if you needed two, or you could do this, or like, why wouldn't you? I mean, everybody's making money, and you're not taking advantage of, you're not screwing over the vendor. They've offered it. So, you know, that's the way that you have to look at that stuff. And also too, I'm not a big proponent of fake goods either. I just, for some people, it makes them feel better. And there's certain things that maybe if that's what they like, or, you know, I mean, and it's just what it is. But to me, I don't know. Quality over quantity is just something that I live by. You can disagree. You can at me. I mean, listen, I'm not saying that I haven't. I've been to Beijing. I've gotten some great bags. I've gotten some great things that I've really enjoyed. But then I look at it, it doesn't have the same value as something that I've gotten differently for me. But I've done both. I've seen both, and I've seen it, and it's just, you know, it's what's important, and it's what it is, but also being smart about the money, and do you really need it? That's always a question. I saw a good lesson on that the other day too, where someone said that if you want something, put it in the cart for 7 days. And after that 7 days, if you still like it, then get it. If you didn't and you don't care, then you really didn't need it to begin with. And I think that's great too. And also too, another thing is sometimes a promo code will come up. Sometimes, you know, they'll give you a discount so you do buy it, and whatever the case. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. So that being said, you know, being lean about how you spend, being strategic, and being meaningful, because, you know, I'm not saying hold on and grip tight to the money, but I'm also saying be smart about it. And also too, if you are starting a business, if you are, you know, trying to expand your current business, you know, there's a lot of different resources that are out there. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to spend your personal money. Sometimes it makes sense to have opportunities that are out there. As far as, you know, especially if you're a woman-owned small business, you know, the SBA has a ton of loans that are very cheap, you know, and you can go to the sba.gov. And you can source, there's local offices in every city that you can have conversations. You can apply for loans, grants, things like that. Yes, they're a pain in the ass to apply for, but guess what? When it's free or heavily discounted interest rates, it's a great way to use the money to work for you, to help you build. Because I've had a conversation with a girlfriend of mine about that too, when there was an opportunity to take a very, very big line of credit. And she looked at it differently than me. I looked at it in a way that I was like, okay, they're going to give you $250,000. That $250,000 isn't $250,000 worth of debt. That is $250,000 of opportunity for you to make $500,000. And then you pay that $250,000 back. You have to look at it in ways that there's opportunities, and whether that was expanding your business, expanding, you know, your online presence, expanding revenue, hiring employees that are going to help you grow that business and bring in more revenue, whatever the case is, based on what your business is and your business plan. It's taking money and working money to work with you, not against you and hold you back. Now, don't get me wrong. We've all been in these situations where I'm like, fuck, how am I going to pay rent? What am I going to do? all of that stuff. I've been through it 50 million times, and I will continue to go through it. Where, I've got bills. I went through a divorce. My divorce cost me a fortune because my ex-husband didn't want to get a job for 3 years or 4 years, and he got his green card, and that's a whole other story. That's a whole fucking episode in itself. And it's one of those things where I got out of that divorce with a fucking shit ton of debt. So even though my business was doing good and I was paying my bills were much higher, and the credit card rates and interest rates were much higher than I wanted to be. So it's been a little bit of a struggle for me personally. But it's taught me how to set my priorities. It's taught me how to level myself out. It's taught me to not make those same fucking mistakes that I did the first time. And not only is it about paying off the debt, because I've been debt-free before, I'll be debt-free again. And that's part of it too. I truly believe in that. Like, I believe I'm good. And when I really believe that I'm good, I tend to kind of relax, not fucking spiral, and then turn around and be like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. Sometimes I'll have to rob Peter, pay Paul. Sometimes somebody bailed me out, and then I have to pay them back. Whatever the case is, there's a flow that you've got that support that's there. And the thing is, like what I said before, sometimes things don't always look the way that you think that they're going to look, but they got done. They just didn't look the way that you thought they would. So if you think about it that way, it'll always work itself out. So with that, we talked about coupons, loyalty programs. I forgot about that. That was another thing too. Credit card points. I'm the queen of points. I'm the queen of miles. I am the queen of signing up for every fucking loyalty thing, from Jersey Mike's to this to that, whatever. You know what? A free sandwich is a free sandwich. And I am not beneath a free sandwich, especially when I've spent, X amount of dollars in that location. And that's great. Like, what? Check yourself, okay, ladies? Just check yourself with that, because that's the smartest thing that you can do. And also, too, it's brand loyalty. And it's a good thing. It's a win-win for everybody, because you're coming back to that location. You enjoy that location. They appreciate your business. That's how you have to look at stuff. And, and you also have to be to the point where you work smarter versus harder. And as you're growing, and sometimes, too, it's always putting that cart before a horse. So for me, with my business, and obviously as I'm digging myself out of a hole, from the divorce and from moving and all this good stuff, is that I do a lot of stuff myself, and I will exhaust myself before I delegate something to somebody else and have to pay them, because I also want to make sure that I'm able to pay them and that I'm able to do what I need to do, because I value the help that they give me, and it's very important to me. It's having those conversations and having that right person in there that can help you with that stuff. And if you are building a business, having the right payroll person that's really going to help you organize your bills and work smarter and pay them in a way that's not, reducing the liquidity in your company that may be needed for other things that might, take place, as far as like employee, payroll or this or that or whatever the case is, or learning that this might be a better way to do it, or a better platform to do it on. Or, I've had, friends and colleagues that, they do all these apps and they're paying $30 for this and $50 for this and $100 for this. And then some of the stuff they can actually pay one person, and something that may have cost them $500 a month, that one person might only cost them $200 a month. And sometimes it's better because there's a different accountability to what they're providing, especially from, that service of whether it's a payroll, whether it's bookkeeping, or whether it's an administrative support skill, whatever the case it is. So, but I will say, buyer beware. It's, if you are hiring people, you always want to make sure you interview them. They are working, because that goes back to the first thing we discussed, is knowing your money, knowing where it is, knowing how it's being dispersed, what access is there, knowing who you're delegating those responsibilities to, trusting, making sure that there is trust there, making sure that there's professionalism there, making sure that they are doing what they are supposed to be doing, which is hiring. And obviously that's going through hiring a professional, vetting the right person, and making sure that you are, once again, being smart and not just throwing things in the air. With all of this, the last thing that I kind of tie into this whole topic of building wealth is, when you do all of this, and whether it's going back to work, going back to educate yourself, building a small company, or establishing a small company, growing a small company, growing a larger company, whatever it is, I can't stress enough the need to make sure that you have your own financial independence. Period. Mic drop. Because I'll tell you, with relationships, with any kind of relationship, family, lovers, friends, professional, anything, if you bring your own weight to the table, you're only carrying your own weight. You are, it creates a balance. It creates strength. It creates options. It creates strategies for you. Because I have been shocked. Being on the East Coast, being raised on the East Coast and Northeast, living on the East Coast, living on the West Coast, and now living in the middle of America, I was not privy to this whole concept of using marriage as a career. The fuck is that shit? I'm sorry. And listen, I'm not saying, I believe in women's rights. I don't believe in being a feminist where I'm seeing things from such a way that's not that, and that you should only do it yourself and da-da-da. We need men. We need women. We need partners. We need family. We need all of that. That's not what I'm saying. So let me be clear. Don't at me. This is not what I'm fucking saying. What I am saying is that when you have your own financial wealth and you have your own responsibility to yourself, you come into relationships in a way that it demands respect. There's value. There's appreciation. There's just, when you got your own money, no one can tell you what to fucking do. Period. That's it. It's so fucking simple. And that's the thing. So when you build your own brand and your wealth and your money, if you're in a situation that you don't want to be in, whether it's personal, love, business, family, you can get the fuck out like that. And that's the best feeling to have. You're not held there. You're not obligated. You're not stuck. You are not anything other than you. And that is a wonderful feeling because it teaches people to appreciate you, and it teaches them that you are valued and that you are in a position where they do wrong by you, you're out. You've got a choice. It just gives you choices. And that's so critical, and that's so important to have choices. And when you have your own and you make your own money, and there's a situation, and say you're in a relationship and you happen to cheat and you want to walk away from that, then you know what? You can. If you're using him as you're a dependent, or her and you're dependent of that, you're stuck. You don't have control of your own life. You don't have control of anything, which is absolutely crazy. And it's a crazy way to live because it's scary. And sometimes those circumstances are not the way that you thought it was and it ended up that way. And other circumstances are at the point where you let that happen. Don't do it again. Okay? Learn the lesson. Because I've seen that happen so many times now with women that I'm just like, I'm confused. So, anyway, don't use marriage as a career, period. I'm not even going to get into it further. And you know what? Make your own money. That's it. Because you'll be evolved so much more as a better person. And that will make you a better friend, a better lover, a better partner, a better mother, a better daughter, a better colleague. Because you see the value in yourself. And the other people see the value in you too. And if they don't, they can go. And you can tell them, don't let the door hit you in the ass. So anyway, that is as building wealth. So I think we addressed, from a question standpoint, we kind of addressed it. I mean, it's one of the questions that did come up that I've had from my founders that kind of came across my desk was, how is it worded? It was worded in a way that was, question was, how do I make money? So in everything that I explained to you, money isn't made by surface things. Like it's like, yes, people tell you get a job and you make money. Yeah, obviously. But it's not, it's building a career, building yourself, educating yourself to be prepared to advance. Because making money isn't just about putting in hours and clocking out hours and kind of this thing that just circles over and over and over again. It's more about building that inspiration, building that passion, building that excitement, building all those things that are going to make you grow as a person. And when you love what you do and you find where that passion is, it just comes. And it's crazy because it's almost unbelievable how it is, but it comes in a way that is least expected. I mean, I plan events for a year, for a career. I mean, my career is events. I do probably it's stressful and it's a pain in the ass sometimes, but it's one of the most, exciting, prestigious jobs. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, if you asked me at 5 years old, you'd be planning parties and these big concerts for celebrities and all this stuff, I would be like, oh, that sounds cool. How am I going to do that? It just, things fall into place when you do the work. And with that, the wealth comes. But you just have to, you just really have to understand money, work with it where it works for you, not against you, and be smart about it. So that's my answer to that. And once again, I have my Charlieism, which we talk about as my beloved father, who likes to say, every fucking inappropriate thing that just comes out of his mouth, which I wonder where I get it from. But one of his favorite quotes, as he is an entrepreneur and instilled that in me, is, you want money? Go make more. Which is, in short, kind of the answer that I've talked about with everything else, is that, money is never, wealth is never scarce unless you think it is. There's always opportunity for more. There's always opportunity to take you to the next level. There's always opportunity to leverage it to get to those next steps. You just have to look for it, and you have to do it in a way that's smarter versus harder. So that's how it is, and that's the best Charlieism. So that being said, you got more questions, you want to talk about more topics, you got thoughts, you got feedback, you got a great story for me that might make me laugh, cry, things that we can talk about more on the show. Would love to hear your feedback and from you. So definitely send me a DM on Finding Her the Show on Instagram, or just go to standinformation.com and we got a contact page over there, and reach out to us. And obviously, don't forget to like, follow, share, repost. That's how it gets us out there and continues this big quest that we're on, founders. So anyway, thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate you so much. And keep finding her. I'll see you next week.